Hi, welcome. We're doing something a little different tonight. We're having really more of an informal, impromptu conversation. I have been really wanting to speak to Yettie a little bit more about her adoption experience and the different pieces that she's been through. And I think that this is the perfect time to do it. Yettie's a dear friend of mine, but Yettie has been on he a few times, one time. I can't remember. Yeti, how many times have you been on here? You'll tell us in a second. And I think that,
Hey,
Yeti, how many times?
what? How many times what?
How many times have how many times did we do this? Once? It feels like
Alive,
10
we've
million
done
times.
one, but we
Right.
talk all the time.
Right. That's why I was like getting confused. I'm like, I talk to you all the time. So it feels like we've done this more than once.
Right.
But the last time you and I spoke with an audience,
Right.
we spoke more about your infertility journey and
Right.
not specifically your diagnosis, but basically just getting the diagnosis and what that meant and how you viewed that and all the different pieces. Let's tonight, being that this is a week that we're talking more about adoption, and we try to talk about the emotional aspects of the different things that people go through. So I wanted to bring you here to talk about why this was something that you finally got yourself sort of up to the point where you were ready to do. Because you and I have discussed many times, and I want you to tell how you never thought you would ever consider an adoption, or that you weren't ready. And like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I
No,
want
you
you
got it
to,
right.
okay, fine. I mean, we talk a lot, so I figured, hey, why not?
Right.
I'm like, I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but like, I feel like I've heard you say them a bunch of times anyway, so maybe. But so what was that process like for you? And and also, and I'm throwing a lot at you, right?
Yeah.
And then
And we
also,
have a short amount of time.
correct, like we're doing this for a short amount of time. And then also, what I think would be really useful for people is to talk about, like, once you adopted your first son, then was it like, okay, like, I'm done, we're not going to try anymore? I know the answer to this, but I want you to tell everybody else. We're not going to try anymore. We're just going to, like, adoption's our path. This is the way it's going to happen. We'll continue on. So the floor is yours.
Okay, so if you don't know me, I'll just give you a quick
Please.
synopsis of my
Yes.
life. I never expected to hear the words from at least 4 doctors, because back in the day, my diagnosis was something that wasn't, there wasn't a final thing you can do 1, 2, 3, and you get your diagnosis. It was, you did one thing after another, because we're talking 26 years ago. So we went from one doctor to the next, to the next, to the next, and each doctor, their words, which you put up there on a little meme or whatever, was, "A really sorry, you'd make great parents, you're better off adopting." And that was like one after the other after the other. So for me, hearing those words were a death sentence, because you're telling me that my entire dream world doesn't exist. And now you're telling me that I have to make a whole new road, a whole new life. And that was like not in my, I was 22 when it started. So like, I have my whole life ahead of me. What are you talking about? There's technology out there. There's so much that could change. Anything could happen for me. And then I basically would not give in. That was like, I was going to hold on to it and fight, fight, fight. And I think that's, when I call myself on my page infertility warrior, we're all warriors. We're fighting. We're not just saying, okay, sure. We're not going, sheep to the slaughter. We're going to keep fighting.
Yep.
And then and then I remember one of my sisters saying to me, and it depends who it comes from. Always depends, any comment, who it comes from.
Totally.
So there were certain comments I could take and certain comments I could say, go away. Like if I was strong enough to that person, I was close.
Right.
And I remember my sister saying to me, Yettie, there's a very long list for adoption. You need to put yourself on a list. And it may happen when you're 27, Yettie, but you're 22. Put yourself on a list. And I was like, no. And then I knew I wasn't ready, because I would say, well, if I'm going to have a baby, I'm going to pick the cutest one. And I'm not going to get this. And like, stupidities. pure stupidities. Because
you were young. You were young.
Totally. And I was in denial in the fact of, I don't want to hold on to something of, the main point was I need to prove every doctor wrong. Do not, if you know my personality, you tell me that, well, Yettie, the
That I
sky
do.
is red.
I know your
will
personality.
prove to you the
Yeah,
sky
keep
is
going.
blue. Like, I don't care. Don't tell me what I'm supposed to do. So that was like really where I kept fighting. And so I never really said, let's go put ourselves on a list. I'm just jumping ahead. And then, we just decided, okay, this is our life. I remember my father saying to me when we got our final no, I was 27, and he said, Yettie, go adopt. And I said, no, we want to tour the world. We're not ready for that yet. Now we want to just enjoy ourselves. We've been fighting for 7 years and nonstop. I just want to breathe a little. And I think anyone going through infertility understands that. You're constantly on eggshells. You're constantly emotionally, physically just drained, and and spiritually. So you just need to take a step back and breathe a little. And I remember looking at the doctor, the final one that, was working with me. And after we did some procedure, whatever, he wanted to make sure everything was okay. And I said to him, I'm going to have a baby. And he's like, of course you will. A mother says to a child who wants to be the astronaut, or he's going to jump off a cliff. And she goes, you won't do that, honey. It's a little, whatever. But of course you will. You could become the astronaut. You could become whatever you want to be, And I was like, no, you don't understand. I'm going to have a baby. I'm going to prove to you I'm going to have a baby. I'll be back in a year with a picture of my baby. And what gave me literally a power within just to stand up and hold myself high was that I was getting dressed in the room, and I hear him saying to his nurse or the receptionist or whatever, she's not hopeful, she's determined. And it wasn't that it was just, don't tell me what my life is supposed to be. I will decide what my life is supposed to be. You're nobody. There's a God, and I'm going to hold on to that. And however, yes, my older one, when we got the call, we had gone to Lezhensk. We went to pray at that, Rabbi Elimelech of Lezhensk. He's, a holy man. And we
hold on. I just want to, I'm going to, I'll repost that post that Yettie spoke beautifully about, you posted beautifully the story about, the lead up to this experience of where you got the call. So yeah.
Right. So
I'll post that afterwards.
So I basically, in short, after we prayed, I didn't think I prayed hard enough. I literally told someone I was cold. I kept wondering, how did the Holocaust survivors do this? I'm wearing sweatshirts and coats, 2 layers of pants, sweatpants, under a
what
skirt.
country? What country was this?
Poland in February. It was freezing. I'm thinking, how did they do this? And all these other women and men were staying and praying. And I kept going back for hot cocoa. I kept going back for hot soup.
And why? I want to go back for a second.
Sure.
We as an organization, we as as what we put out in the world, we don't talk about, oh, you should go daven here. Oh, you should do this segula. Oh, you should we don't do any of that because it's not part of our mission. Our mission is really to hold emotional space for people as they're struggling. But I want you to just in this moment explain why it was that you felt that you wanted to go to this specific grave, why this was meaningful.
So my sister had a baby, and at the bris, her husband's grandmother, who happens to be she was the grandmother of the heads of a time, and she was always looking out for me. And she says, Yettie, you have to go to my grandfather's gravesite. And I'm like, okay, who is he? You're telling me. She was a short, little, cute woman. And I said, who is he? And she says, he's so-and-so. And I said, okay. She goes, he's in Poland. I'm like, it's expensive. I'm not picking up and going. She goes, oh, it's only $1,000. I'm like, I'm glad you think I have that after all the fertility, treatment. So I ended up going. My mother got my husband the last ticket out. I went because I felt like I needed that spiritual connection. And sometimes that's okay. There were times I could not pray and I would just talk. And I'd say, God, I'm angry at you. Why are you doing this to me? What did I do? And then there were times that I just felt that amazing connection to God. And I felt like maybe he could be everyone holds differently. I had a friend that said, my rabbi told me to go pray in the bathroom if I want to do, like, everyone
Right.
holds different.
Yeah.
This gave me something to do. My life, my rules, my way. No one else could tell me otherwise. And I went to, so we ended up flying out. And when I went to pray by him, I said, you are, hopefully will be the messenger to go to God and talk on my behalf. I made a promise. If I have a child, I will name it after you. But I'm not going to give a time limit. Before it used to be within the year, I've had so many that I walked over to them, their grave sites afterwards, and I said, sorry, you lost the name, not yours
Totally.
now, like, don't care. But we went, and then 2 days later, we came home. And yes, I worked at the, mikvah, the holy waters, because that was something.
The ritual bath. Yeah.
Ritual bath. That's the word I was looking for. The ritual bath. And they said, we want you to work there because someone told me, go and work there. So I cleaned the rooms. Like, that was like my thing. And I felt beautiful doing it for other women, that they could feel comfortable doing this. So that was like my thing. So anyway, the point was 2 days later, we get a call of, hey, there's a baby available. Are you interested? It was the first time. I got so many calls over 7 years. One time I was in the bathroom and I was hysterical crying. And I said, that baby's not getting a single one of the names that I picked out. Hello? That means I don't want the baby. And it was a realization. I was hysterical crying in my shower that I have a list of names and that baby's not. I was like, no, I can't do that to a baby. I need to love that baby. And it was the first time I ever said, I want this. And can I say that my husband and I were on the same page? No. When he wanted to adopt, I wasn't. When I wanted to adopt, he wasn't. And so that was like something that was like back and forth. We went into therapy. I'm a big believer in therapy. We spoke about it. I remember, and I've spoken about this before, when I said to him, now that I don't want this baby, God's not going to give me another baby. Because he'll say, I offered you one and you didn't take it. Now, that was my religious background, that I was raised, God is tit for tat. I wasn't raised by my parents that way, but by my school system. Right. And I realized God, and then my therapist opened my eyes when he said, I don't know about you, but my God doesn't work that way. And I was like, oh, really? Like, what a concept. So basically after that, I changed my whole viewpoint. I worked really hard on being more accepting and understanding people, and, where myself, my relationship with God changed. It was like, all of a sudden I have a loving father who, no matter what, I could scream, rant, rave at him, but he'll still love me because he knows where my pain is coming from. Totally. So that helped me. So knowing that all of a sudden I got this call and I wanted it. And I remember being a mess. I just had my wisdom teeth pulled. They were supposed to be pulled 18 and a half years ago. The day I was supposed to speak to the birth mother, I called the dentist and I'm so sorry. It was like 3 days of craziness, and then the birth mother, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, I have to cancel the appointment. She's like, yeah, it was yesterday. I'm like, what? So I just pulled my wisdom teeth from what I was supposed to when I adopted my older one. It was a crazy whirlwind. A lot that I learned about adoption is, I love Javi Bruck, and she's amazing. She adopted 5 children. She lives in Montana. The rules of Montana are so different than the rules of New York. If I could have adopted in between every 2-3 years, I would have. It's not easy in New York. And Queens County that I live in is even tougher than other counties. Every county has their own, every place. After we adopted my oldest, which was crazy in itself, like we had to travel from one state to the next. You had to get permission from one state to leave to enter back into your state, but each state had to give you permission. So you had to wait for the permission from each one. It was a whirlwind. We had a lot of people that said, oh, we know this person, that person, if you need it. So we worked it out. But what I learned was every state has an amount of time that a birth mother or the birth father, both, could change their minds, and they don't have to go to court, and they can just take the baby back. Oh, wow. So, for example, my son was born in Detroit, my older one. There, it's 3 days the birth mother has to change her mind, come with the sheriff, take the baby, and go. In New York City, New York State, 45 days.
Oh, wow.
So after we
Wow.
got our 45 days, the birth father signed the 45 days because there was some back and forth. So now we had to wait another 45 days.
Oh my goodness.
So that was 90 days up until anyone could come. The birth father could change his mind.
Right.
Now, I always knew this is my baby. I'm not giving it up. But every state, I think Texas is the fastest. It's within 24 hours. No, right away. The birth mother loses, I think, I'm almost positive. Check it up. New Jersey, I think, is 2 days. So every state has their own. A lot of people will go to Texas because it's 1, 2, 3, and then they just have to wait for the finalization. There's a whole process after that also. So when after my son was 18 months old, I was like, I'm ready. 2 years, I'm ready. Everyone else waits 2 years. I had a friend that was in Atlanta. She still lives here, actually. And she said to me, she goes, Yettie, you have to call my agency that you'll have a baby in 6 months. I just did it, whatever, and it worked out great. I don't even remember the agency. I could try. But if you live in New York, I called the agency and they said, well, we deal with every single state but one. And I go, please tell me it's not New York. And she goes, honey, do you live there? And I'm like, yes. She goes, we can't deal with your state because they consider it as if we're selling the baby.
Oh gosh.
So I always say when couples call me and talk to me about adoption, I ask them, what area do you live in? For example, we had to deal with over state lines. So my lawyer gave us a name of 3 people in the state of Michigan that in Detroit that we can call that are a part of the American Adoption of Lawyers, whatever. I forgot exactly what it's called. But and so we hired him. I picked that. It's funny how I pick my lawyers, by the way. Someone gave me a name and I went, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a tiger bite. So when I said, God, pick it, that's how I make my decisions.
Look, you know what? If it works, it works. So
exactly. And then, so we ended up calling the lawyer and we couldn't talk to the lawyer. The lawyer was hired for her. We paid for her lawyer because we went private. Adoption agencies have their lawyers that they work with, and then they're the go-between. In a private adoption, so I didn't say that our adoption was a private adoption. So it started as a semi-open, meaning we were going to send photos.
Right.
And somewhere, I guess I got overwhelmed. I forgot my baby was very colicky. I didn't mean to forget. She wrote us a letter. I literally was stacking pictures up. My mom was like, Yettie, you only have to send 2. You don't have to send like 100, And we sent them. But our lawyers happen to have said, usually by 5 years, the birth mothers, they don't really keep up. They're like, they're okay if they don't have to, and we kind of look her up to see, and she never mentions him, never anything. But we're open and honest with our kids. Very open. From day one, I used to call him my matana, my gift from God. And which he is. Every baby is a miracle. I will say, I saw what you wrote about how the person said, like, a last resort, and you shouldn't say. I don't think anyone really does that. I've never seen anyone do that. I think that anyone that's making the choice to adopt, like, I kind of got triggered by that, only because I don't think a couple that's going through infertility chooses adoption as a last resort. It's, I want that baby so badly. This is my next step. This is, where I'm up to. Or it hits them, they get a call and like, whoa, I wanted this, I don't think it's like, you're my last resort. My boys know it. Like, I texted him today. I texted him a photo. I found the back of his head on the WhatsApp group for his school that he's in. And I text him, I blow it up and I go, I'm your favorite stalker. And he goes, yeah. Like, I'm a nutty mother. I'm the helicopter mom, and I'm okay with that. I dressed up as a helicopter mom last year. They are my life. Yeah, they're my life. And I don't think that we choose anyone as a last resort. I chose my children. I wanted biological children. I consider these mine. I forget. I made a comment to my son. He's like, Ma? And I'm like, oh, right. like he was adopted. I was like, oh, totally. I said, well, you come from me, okay? And I practically breathed you. And he's like, really now? I go, hit, and I went like this, hit me with a knife, why don't you? You know, like, cause like, we were laughing. He's like, Mom, really? And I'm like, oh, that hurt to the core, you know? But I wanted to adopt. We had so many situations that were failed. You know, we looked, there was some that were not well. And I remember we spoke to our pediatrician and we said, should we do this? And he's like, no, there will be other babies. You don't need to take this on. There were these twins, and I was going to foster. If it turned into adoption, fine. At this point in my life, I could do foster. I'm in a more secure, safe place. Years ago, before we adopted, I called my friend's mother who worked at O Health, which deals with fostering. And I said, should I do this? And she goes, Yettie, it will destroy you. I know you since you're 14. You will get attached and you will not be able to let go. And she's right. I'll give my all to this. Now, why not do a good deed? Why not help out someone? And if I can give them a home, yeah, I could do it. That was something that was an emergency. It ended up falling through. I was devastated, a part of me, because I really wanted to do it, and it kind of like got taken away. I had other cases where we thought it was happening. It's like having a miscarriage. I have a friend. I was angrier than her. She went to the hospital with the car seat, and the birth mom changed her mind, which is the worst fear ever. Oh, wow. Like, I remember going to the hospital to see my oldest, and all I kept saying to my older sister is, what if she's nursing him? What if, like, you know, she builds a connection? She goes, Yettie, the hospital knows what to do. These are all our fears. I remember thinking to my sister, my other sister, I said, what if he's ugly and I don't, like, love him? And she goes, well, have you seen my son? He's so ugly, but I love him. You know, like, but a true mother knows her kid is not good looking. She wasn't saying like, oh my gosh, she loves her baby. She goes, yes, he's not a good looking baby. He's not cute. He's not cuddly looking. She goes, you will love him no matter what. And the truth is, God loves me, because to me, they were the most beautiful, perfect children ever. Like, they're just, and I remember being in awe and like, wow. But like, this one friend that went to the hospital, that was the second baby that a birth mom changed her mind on her. And I'm screaming and crying. And she's like, Yettie, should I come over and give you a hug? And I'm like, no, I'm supposed to hug you. It's the other way around. And to me, that's like experiencing an entire miscarriage. Like, you had your hopes up. You were told you're getting this baby, and then you have to go home empty-handed. How do you pick yourself up from that? You know,
I so much appreciate the way you just described that, because you're 1000% right. Like, as you're speaking about it, I absolutely see the overlap. It's the anticipation of having a baby. It's you're planning, you're thinking, you're doing, you're already, like, you know, imagining all the different possibilities in your head of what's going to be and how this child is going to integrate, and then nothing.
And it's like, and you have to somehow walk out. Nobody knows this has been happening to you. Same way, kind of like a miscarriage. No one knows that it's happening at the moment. So all these moments that you have, and you're like, oh my gosh, like, this is something I dreamed about, I wanted, and now how do I go explaining this? None of my husband's families ever knew about the other babies that we got called about. On the Erev Shabbos, my husband walked around with a cell phone. We got a sock from a Rav. We got how do you explain it? We got
an allowance from
an allowance to walk around with a cell phone on Shabbos, because what if we got the call on Shabbos, the baby's available to take home? You have to be there. So, you know, like, we were going to do that. There was another case where my son was 18 months old, my older one, and we got a phone call from a couple from A-Time that was in line to get a baby. And they were having arguments with their family because the baby wasn't well. All the organs were connected. I don't know how. I think, like, you're the one that helped us find this. I don't even remember, because I think you were working in a hospital at the time. It's got to be like 16, 17 years ago.
Yep, sounds about right.
Yeah, and I remember, I think you worked in the hospital, I'm almost positive it was you, because I remember calling you recently and saying, were you there, whatever. I just remember the couple didn't want to tell us any info. They weren't taking the baby. We're like, okay, nothing against any race or whatever. I was like, this is a Jewish baby they're going to put into the States. And there are so many Jewish homes that would take the baby. So my husband and I were running around trying to figure out the baby's situation, where the baby was located. They gave us. We ended up calling our lawyers. They're like, no, we represent.
Oh my gosh. By the way, as you're just talking,
what?
I'm like, now, like something is coming back. Like, I feel like there is some part of this situation that I was
That's
involved
how far
in.
back
Yeah, keep going. Something's coming back now.
Yeah, and we had to interrupt a doctor that we knew to find out what is the situation, because we have a list of couples that we know. And it's very hard because a lot of couples also, I want to get to this, very important. We ended up finding a couple out of the blue. My mother-in-law, we were going to take the baby from foster. And we said, if it turns into adoption, we'll turn it into adoption. My mother-in-law says, but Yettie, Elimelech's only 18 months old. He's really young. And I'm thinking, lots of couples have babies 18 months apart.
Totally.
You know?
Totally.
So we end up finding a couple for this baby. And they call him their $1 million baby, because they called their rabbi, and their rabbi says to them, you know, my grandson so-and-so, yes, he had the same situation, take the baby. Okay? So it was a beautiful thing. This baby is great. And then she calls me about a baby, and I'm like, I want one. If I get a call, I'm taking it. She ends up becoming pregnant. She thought she was in early menopause. And so now she has 2 boys. And whatever, and they're living happily ever after, thank God. But what's crazy also, and I want to talk about this, a lot of couples go back and forth between a Jewish born baby versus a non-Jewish baby that could become Jewish, and they're going, no, my rabbi doesn't let, or I only need this type. And I'm like, do you know how limited you're making yourself by just going into one category? And I think, first of all, number one, it is rude for anyone to ever ask a couple, was your baby born Jewish? Who the hell are you? Excuse my language, but that's how I feel.
Yep.
That is none of your business. If one day the child wants to talk about it, it's a child's story to tell, not anyone else to talk about it. And I always tell couples, they're always so worried, and go, answer yes. The baby became Jewish. Who cares? Right. What do you care? You lie all you want. Nobody cares. And he says you're allowed to lie for shalom, for peace. So
for peace.
Good going, you know, like, I don't care. So here I have all these couples that are like, I only want a Jewish baby. I'm sorry. Do you know that now, I don't even know if I'm supposed to talk about it, but like abortion, a lot of the young girls that would have given their babies up for adoption are having abortions.
Yep.
So there are no babies necessarily to be found. So it's making it so much harder for couples to adopt. And I always say, like I tell couples, go to the Hillel houses, talk to Chabad around the United States, anywhere, you know, put an ad in the newspaper. I was about to put ads in the newspaper and write, you know, looking to adopt and blah, blah, blah. And you give a 1-800 number, put it out there. We stood up, and my second son, so when we adopted my second son, one of my friends 2 weeks earlier says, so Yettie, new? Are you going to adopt again? My older one had just turned 7. And I said, you know me, we like them to fall out of the sky. 2 weeks later, we get a call. Now, the crazy part was, now this doesn't happen to everyone, but I'm a nutcase, as you can tell. And I was a teacher at the time, and a bunch of kids came screaming over during recess. A bunch of babies fell out of their nests, and they don't know what to do. Baby birds.
Birds.
Birds. Nests. Not babies.
Yeah.
I'm cute to you.
You're good. Keep going.
So and what happens was, so I go and we bury one dead one, and then we try to put one back in the nest, and then there's one that we can't. What I can't remember if we put it back. I'm like, you know what? I have an incubator because I hatch chicks. I'm going to take care of this baby. So a kid gives me his like little kugelach, his little what are kugelach? The beads and the whatever. Yeah. They're little. It's a game, and it has a nice little, you know, clear case. We put the baby bird in there, and I wrap it because I know it needs warmth. And my one teacher comes over. She goes, "Oh, Yettie, are you my mother? You know, the bird."
Oh my gosh, the story. Yeah.
So I look at her, I go, well, I feel like maybe if I take care of God's creations, Hashem will give me a creation for me.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, fine. We go home. My son and I look up on the internet how to feed a wild robin. We go and we buy dog food, heat up eggs. We heat up the incubator. Of course, it dies anyway, so we bury it in the backyard. And then, oh yeah, kugla stones, thank you, or knickknacks or whatever. Anyways, we go ahead and we, 2 weeks later, I get a call from this couple. I didn't even realize I was saying the couple that we helped adopt this baby got a call, and they thought it was better for us. So they call us in turn. A few years later, we have a baby. Are you interested? Now, as crazy as I am, my husband and I were in kind of a disagreement. And he comes in, there's a baby available. Do you want it? And I'm like, because yes, husband and wives do have disagreements. I'm like, right now. And I was on the phone with my sister-in-law, Deborah, the one that you know, right? And I'm on the phone and I'm going, right now? You want to do this right now? And I'm venting to her about this stupid disagreement we're having. And she goes, did you just say no to an adoption? And I'm like, shut up. And I hang up on her. And so my husband calls her to call me to convince me. I don't need to be convinced. I have to deal with, everything goes into a category.
A moment. You needed a moment.
So he comes and he goes, Yettie. And I go, fine, okay. That night we go meet him. It was the most beautiful thing. And what was so amazing was that, like, here I have this baby that 2 weeks earlier I said, God, I'll take care of one of yours. Will you take? Now, I'm not saying that did it.
Of course, of course,
like,
of
so,
course.
Like, at the same time. And, like, where my older one was colicky. And, like, you know, here for 8 years, I planned. Oh, by the way, he was born. His due date was the same had I gotten pregnant. Like, that was the crazy part also.
Oh, wow.
And so, like, I had proof. I went over to the doctor, by the way, and I said, just letting you know, I may not have given birth, but God gave me a baby.
Amazing.
Like
amazing.
a dinner or something.
Amazing.
I went over to him. But it was just validation for me. Like, don't tell me, you know. But my older one, that's something I also tell couples. Before you have your babies, know that babies bring chaos. I lived in La La Land. I pictured my life was going to be heaven on earth when I had my baby one day. And instead, I got chaos. I was sitting there eating chocolate, and my husband's like, you hate chocolate. And I burst into tears, like, oh, I have postpartum depression. And he's like, what? You didn't have a baby? I go, I don't know. He was screaming for 5 months straight. I was ripping my hair out. So I feel it's important that you go for the therapies, build your marriage, build your foundation, because a marriage can survive anything if it has a strong foundation. And I remember went back to therapy, and he's like, what happened to the two of you? Like, where is this couple that I know? And I remember saying to him, well, the baby's crying all the time and I can't go shopping. I can't. He goes, you don't even have to meet Yettie. You're fixing the kitchen room and he's fixing the living room. You need to fix one room together. And so we had to work on that communication in order to, you know, if we had a crack in foundation, it might have crumbled. And don't be afraid to go, you know, asking for help. And someone wrote, post-adoption depression is real.
Yeah.
It was like, also, I had a woman who said to me, she asked me something on the A-Time website. I used to be very involved in writing because it was a place that I can go before there was social media, and I can talk, and I would be up to all hours of the night. And this one woman said to me, she goes, you're not 100% happy? And I said, no. I said, the pain is still there of not giving birth, but it definitely eases my pain. Because I said to her, for 7 years, I've been fighting. How do you let go?
Right. You can't just switch it off. You can't just switch it off.
And this year was the first year listening to you talk so often was about trauma. And infertility is trauma. I never realized it. I'm 26 years in. Come 1 month from yesterday, we got our diagnosis, December 3rd, 1996. I will never forget it.
Wow.
It's like December 7th, 1941, the day of infamy. You just don't, certain things you don't forget.
Right.
And so here I had this trauma and I didn't know how to let go. And I got really upset at her. I said, maybe those people were never honest with you. I said, I love my boys. Like, they're my life. I will go through fire for them.
Yep.
But don't tell me that my feelings, there's something wrong with me.
Correct.
And
they're actually, Yeah, someone sent me, I'll post it either later tonight or tomorrow at some point soon. Someone actually sent me an article recently about this phenomenon of post-adoption depression and anxiety, that it is a very, very real phenomenon that happens for a million reasons, but it is something that is very real.
I won't lie. I never told anyone this. I can't believe I'm saying it here.
Okay.
My husband doesn't even know.
It's only between us and like, you know, the people who are watching.
Something other people, but should I do this?
Don't do anything.
I'll tell you, no, it's fine. I wanted the experience so bad. My husband doesn't even know this. Like, he'll know now because I'm going to tell him, because if everyone else has to know.
Don't get in trouble. Don't get in trouble.
I won't. It has nothing to do with him. It's all me. I tried to nurse my older one. I wanted to experience it. It wasn't for me, obviously, but it was like, could I do this? I wanted to experience it. And I'm being real. Yep. You know, there are so many things about adoption that you don't get, but you do get. Right. It's like an oxymoron. Your life is getting filled. But at the same time, you're missing out on so many other things that other people have experienced. So you want to have those experiences also. It's like very important. It was important to me. I remember sneaking while my husband was out of the room at night. And I was like, you know, quick, let's do this fast, you know, and see, you know.
No, look, I want to say from a medical perspective, there are women who, look, surrogacy is exactly the same, where you're not carrying the baby either, right? It's exactly the same. There are women that take hormones to specifically, I was just,
I know, someone's writing that, and it's true.
Correct.
We had 2 days, I had 2 days notice.
Right.
Before, no, we had a week and a half notice my first, and then we brought him home a week and a half later. And then my second one, we had 2 days notice. Like, we had to call our lawyers off a mountain. He was in Utah skiing. And we had to call him. He's like, don't worry, this happens to everyone. Right. We also got certified with my second one within 2 days. Like, it's not the norm. And things could happen. I just think that, like, I wanted the experience. I wanted certain things to be just like everybody else. I wanted the same carriages as my sisters. I wanted the same whatever. Because I missed out on so many other things. Yep. I think that, like you were saying about surrogacy, I'm going to bring that in only because someone called me up. A girl met me from somewhere and she reached out to me and she was doing surrogacy. She needed a donor egg. And so they did donor egg, not surrogacy. And she was very nervous. And she said to me, will people notice the baby doesn't look like me? I go, nobody cares. He'll look like your husband. Who cares? Like, big deal. I said, and then we talked about, she's like, well, what if I don't feel that it's mine? I said, my boys are mine. I never gave birth to them. I said, but let me ask you a question. If you did surrogacy, your egg, your husband's sperm, someone else is carrying the baby for you. Which do you feel is more yours? Your blood running through that baby? I said, decide what you feel. Now, both are yours. Both are yours. It doesn't matter. But for this girl, she needed that psyche of, it's, you know, and it put into perspective of what she was talking about. And I kept saying to her, what you're doing is a beautiful thing. You're going to have a baby. All your thoughts and your questions about what will people think. I had those questions. We'd walk down the street right after we adopted our first. And I said, Alter, I think they're noticing that we have a baby and that we adopted. I think they're talking about us. And he's like, yeah, are they? I go, I feel that all watching us because we now have a baby. You know, my community was smaller back then. I felt like, we had 300 people.
They probably were.
Of course they were. I'm sitting at Deborah's table. Okay. She had a long, her dining room table. At the end of the table, I know exactly who it was. Our boys were in the same class twice. Okay. She goes, oh, is that the sister? I'm holding either Yehuda or Eli Melech. I don't remember. She goes, no, it had to be Eli Melech. Oh, is that the sister-in-law that adopted? And I'm like, I could see you and hear you. And I wanted to wave to her like I'm over here.
Exactly.
Yes, people notice. And yes, people ask us where his red hair comes from.
Totally.
We walked into a pizza shop. He was in 11th grade and a 9th grader is sitting there. We knew that. Yetti's
older son has red hair. I just like,
oh yes,
Leia, who was commenting here, also commenting in the comments here, also has red hair. So but keep going.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So he asks us, he says, so he says, oh, so you're Ellie Mel's parents. Oh, he's so awesome. Like, he's like, this great kid. And he goes, where does the red hair come from? So my husband goes, the beard. So he goes back to my son. He goes, I think it's so funny. You have red hair and your parents don't. He goes, yeah, I'm adopted. He goes, no, really? And my son goes, yeah. Someone came over. My husband's a Kohen. That was another deal we had to deal with. That,
and then hold on. I just want to say to everybody, we're gonna close in another 2 minutes. After this, I don't want to cut you off. I want to make sure that you get this last one in. But I want to just say to everyone that, look, Yettie and I could talk all evening, as you see, and she is a wellspring of information about adoption, and she always loves when people ask her questions. So feel free at any point to reach out to her. Okay, last story about your husband being a Kohen.
So my son, I won't lie, we're very into therapy. I've said that. We put my son into therapy when he was being bullied, and we want him to talk about it and things like that. My younger one, interestingly enough, is 10, is the same, well, now he's 11, but same exact age my older one was when he was uncomfortable. Don't tell people I'm adopted. Be quiet about the adoption. And we had to respect that, because I respect my children's feelings. Like, it's not about, it's his story to tell. We will respect that.
Right.
And he, so so when it comes to my husband's a priest in the Jewish world, and by descendant, not because he was ordained. And so because my boys were not born from me, they are not. So they're in a big family that it's a big thing for them. So we try to counteract.
And your husband is one of 7 brothers.
So 7 boys, and mostly boys in the family, mostly boy cousins. So my second one is very nervous. So that's why I'm hiding in my wig room, so he shouldn't hear me, and he can be okay with this, because I don't want him to be uncomfortable. But they outgrow it, and they talk about it because we're very open. And he's even said to one kid, oh yeah, the kid made fun of him. Well, I don't care about your adoption story. Who cares that you're adopted or whatever? Like, just nasty. And my son turned to him and said, well, at least my parents got to choose me, and your parents are stuck with you. Okay, we kind of gave him that. Sorry, but it was like
awesome.
Yeah, we kind of. My husband sat him down and said, "If anyone ever says this is what you have to say."
Awesome, but I love it.
Yes,
I love it.
So now, so when my older one was in the synagogue in shul, and my husband went up to bless the nation, the synagogue, the shul, and a guy comes over to my son after praying, and he goes, "Aren't you a Kohen? Why didn't you go up?" And my son says, I'm not. He goes, but your father is. And he goes, yes. And he goes, and you're not. And my son goes, no, I'm not. He goes, but your father is. And he goes, yes, he is. And you're not.
Some people don't get the hint. Yeah.
Right. But my son was cracking up laughing, because he's like, this is funny, because now, like, he had something against this guy that he knew. Right. That it didn't matter. He's telling us this story, and he looked so powerful with the knowledge that he had, that he made this man feel like confused, like this makes no sense. But he was able to do that because he had the confidence. Because when you're honest with your children and you make it like it's normal. We just had, I'll end with this. We had a couple who adopted. Their son is now 2. He's going to school, and they asked their rabbi, should they, what's it call it? I could talk for hours. Oh my God.
Should they share
it? And the rabbi said no. And my husband said, your rabbi knows nothing. You need to share it, because God forbid something happens. Then that child, the school will be like, well, why didn't you tell us? And I said the same thing. I was a teacher. No one told me that as a student that her parents were divorced. And when I said something, well, why wasn't your homework complete? I mean, you could have done whatever, whatever it was. And he's like, well, I don't understand. Where were you? And he was like, I was with my dad. And I'm like, huh? So we're like, you need to always, and this goes for everyone, you need to notify your school for whatever the situation is. If God forbid something happens, my son's schools both knew how to handle the situation. They knew how to call us. They knew how to handle it. They knew how to defend for him. And that's the key, your children's safety. And I'm just going to end with this, that adoption is an option. It's an amazing experience. You will know sometimes, until you have that baby in your arms, then you're like, oh my gosh, what was I waiting for all these years? I would say if you really are so against, like when I started crying and I said I won't give the baby the name or I won't do, you're not ready. And it's not fair to put a child into a home that may not be. But I'm going to say one more thing that our therapist said to us after we went back, 4 weeks after he was born. The
Ellie
therapist,
Melech, your oldest.
Ellie Melech, yes, Ellie Melech, because he was the colicky screaming one. I have so many stories, but I remember
that's for a different page because
yeah,
we don't do parenting here.
Yeah, so my husband wasn't on the same page with me when I said I want this baby. He went along. When I said I want this, he goes, fine. But he wasn't available to me, and I felt like I was doing it all on my own. I remember we sat in therapy, and the therapist said, my husband turned to the therapist and said, why did you tell Yettie to go ahead with this? Because I called him. And he said, how do you feel? I said, I want this. He says, then go for it. He goes, why did you tell Yettie now to go for it? And his exact words were, Yettie is the caregiver. Yettie is the one that's going to take care of the baby. You will follow suit. He did. I mean, my husband will go through anything for his kids. He'll defend them. He'll go through heaven and earth. But that's the point. If your spouse is not on board, the main person that's going to be the caregiver is you. You have to love that child because a child can sense whether they're not loved or not. And then you have a dysfunctional family.
Yep.
You don't want dysfunction.
Yep.
And being open and honest with the child is the one way that you get rid of dysfunction. Respect how they feel. Don't go and say, oh, please, so everyone knows you're adopted, we could talk about it. You know, like my younger one is going through this thing and he'll overhear me. I'm like, I'm talking to someone that, you know, we're helping them adopt. And he goes, oh, okay. Like now, my friends that all adopted want to have a retreat together. Like we should all go away with our kids. Right. And at first, my husband's like, Yettie, I don't think that's going to be good for you. I said, I actually think this time it will. Before it would have made him feel different. Now because he's going through that uncomfortable stage right now. Who am I? Where do I belong?
Right.
Now he'll see other kids like him and it will give him a sense of belonging that I fit in. Because that's something my therapist said to us years ago when we were thinking, my sister, we were thinking that we were thinking
she's about to be off. We're finishing.
Yeah, we're ending now. So, you know, we were, and my therapist said, don't take Ellie Melch to this. He's fine. You're going to now show him he's different. But now that my son needs to feel that he belongs like this, everyone's awesome, then, and you're awesome. There's nothing different about you. So again, we respect his feelings now. He knows that we don't talk about it. He goes, did you tell the neighbors? I said, no, but the neighbors know. You don't have to, it's your story to tell. If you go and tell people I'm adopted, you're owning the story. But if you don't and you shy away from it, then they have power. Your goal is to take away their power. And that's what I'll end with.
Yep. Yettie, thank you so much for all of this. I mean, we've done everything from the like the thoughts about to adopt, not to adopt, how you viewed all of it from the beginning, and then all of the different stages of what you went through, with each kid, and how to manage afterwards, and how to think about what kind of life to give your kids.
Every state is different. Know that every state laws are different. You have to find them out. Do your research.
Yep. Okay. Yettie, thank you so much for this. Look, this is a small snapshot into the world of adoption. We did, one live last night. We're speaking to Yettie tonight. We're going to do another one over the weekend. I think, God willing, after Shabbos, with a single mother, actually, who did an international adoption. And so we're trying to give you the breadth of this experience to try to understand the different pieces from different vantage points so people can make the proper decision that's good for them. Anyway, Yettie, thank you so much. Everyone, you know where to find her. And I wish you good night. Wish you good night. Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Okay. Good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.